Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help mental health professionals grow their dream practices and live a life they love. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building tips. We invite you to take advantage of our private practice paperwork and our signature marketing e-course. And we have a gift for you. This is the exact methodology we use to create our six-figure private pay practices and have helped many other therapists do the same. Go to privatepracticestartup.com and on the homepage, click the button to download a free copy of your dream private practice playbook. Now on to today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. We hope your day is going fantastic. I'm excited about this podcast because even though Kate and I kind of excel or talk about a certain area or we like to teach on it, it's always cool to hear other people's ninja tips on what they do. So we are inviting, I think, a second time guest. I know she's already been on our podcast, back, Whitney Owens. You might know Whitney of Water Edge Counseling. She is your faith-based group practitioner go-to for really growing and developing a group practice that is faith-based. And she's going to be talking to us today about how to increase your client to call ratio. One thing that Kate and I have found super important in our business, because if we didn't figure that out, we would probably have not had a business. So this is really important. And a therapist can get really caught up in the area of, what do I say on the phone? How do I say that? What if they're asking about insurance? I don't know what to say. So we're going to be talking about all of that today. And Whitney's going to share what she's learned over the years and what she implements in her practice. So who is Whitney? Whitney is a licensed professional counselor, group practice owner, and faith-based private practice consultant. She's located in Savannah, Georgia, where she manages a private paid group practice with 10 plus clinicians. Along with running her practice, she consults practice owners around the country on how to start and grow successful faith-based practices. She hosts summits, a weekly podcast, and a membership community for faith-based practice owners called Wise Practice. Welcome, Whitney.
Thanks for having me on the show.
You are more than welcome. It's great to have you back. And we will definitely put in the show notes our previous podcast where you talked all about faith-based practices.
Yes.
So we'll make sure that we find that in our many, many episodes, 300 plus podcasts, and we'll add that to the show notes as well. So before we dive into the super important topic, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
Directories can be a good source for new clients, but which directories are really worth it? Well, according to an extensive review of therapist directories by Very Well Mind, more than 90% of therapists recommend Mental Health Match. We love Mental Health Match because they understand that the therapeutic relationship starts even before the client contacts you. They've set up their directory to give clients a sense of confidence in you as a clinician and connection with you as a person. Their smart matching technology makes sure you only hear from clients who are a good fit for your practice. And referrals come with insightful information about the client, their presenting problems, and what they seek in a therapist. With over 10,000 clients coming every week, Mental Health Match is a great way to find the clients you want. Erin Moore, a New Jersey therapist, said, "I've been getting almost 2 referrals a week from Mental Health Match, and I like their ability to match me with my niche clients. These clients reflect my skill sets, and they come ready and open to the therapeutic process. This is energizing for both the therapist and clients. We could not agree more. And now you can try Mental Health Match for free for 90 days. Just go to mentalhealthmatch.com and use referral code STARTUP. That's mentalhealthmatch.com and referral code STARTUP.
And I forgot to mention, if you didn't join us last week, definitely check out that podcast with Kelly Sonnenberg, especially if you do insurance billing. We talked about 4 common mistakes in insurance billing. So that was a really helpful podcast as well. All right. So Whitney, I have to say I was in Savannah, Georgia. I don't even know how many years ago, but I'm a foodie. Savannah had some of the most amazing food. I didn't have one thing I didn't like. Everything was amazing.
It's such a cool city.
It is.
Yes, I love living here. I actually moved here from right outside of Denver. And so when we got the job here, my husband and I were both like, if we get to live in Denver and Savannah, we've done good.
That's awesome. And then that's a very Southern saying right there, right? Done good.
We done good.
Yes, definitely. And you are right. The food here is fantastic.
So good. So tell us a little bit about how you became interested in this topic for therapists?
Well, it's important, like you were saying, we wouldn't really have businesses if we couldn't convert the calls into clients. And especially as a private pay practice, it's a lot easier when you take insurance to get people to schedule, but it's kind of a technique or a science really to be able to help people schedule when they want to use their insurance and they're choosing not to. And so being able to kind of figure out that process is important, and then being able to share that, because ultimately we want more clients to be cared for. And so we've got to figure out how to do that on that intake call.
I like how you said that, for more clients to be cared for. That's really important.
I can't tell you how many times I hear clients frustrated because of how hard it is to find a therapist, and how therapists aren't returning their phone calls, and they'll wait for days, sometimes a week, before they hear back from somebody. And it's just not okay.
Definitely not. And my husband makes fun of me for it, but I kind of pride myself on the fact that we answer the phone when it rings, and that's like awesome. A huge pillar of my practice. If you can just answer the phone, and this is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to tell you, if you can just answer the phone, you're going to convert these clients, and it doesn't matter if you have the clinical skills or not, which is kind of sad to say, but it's all about business at the very beginning.
Yeah. So very important. It's funny because I just ran into a tech issue. And literally I was on chat for an hour and 15 minutes. They couldn't solve my tech issue. I'm like, do you have a number I can call? They're like, no. What? It's your platform. And I found like there's support, and I go to, I wanted to call directly, but they're like, oh, here's a link to schedule a call. A week later, I was like losing. I'm like, no. So answering the phone when someone calls is a huge thing for business.
It takes so much courage for these clients to reach out and to make that call in the first place, to not get a call back, to not have someone answer, to not get a call back for, an extended period of time is just not okay. And running a business and managing all the moving parts is a lot, but there's so many resources and people who can help you with that aspect if this is something that you're struggling with. So we're not shaming anybody who may be listening and saying, how do you do it all? Get help, get some, delegate and outsource this aspect of your business if it's not something that you're able to do within a very reasonable time.
And I would add, if you are a solopreneur, right, and you are wearing a lot of the hats, I know I would do this, right, because I would work Wednesday afternoons till late, like at 9:00, and I definitely was not having a consult at 9:30, and who wants to do that anyways? But then I'd go right back into the office on Thursday morning. So I would shoot a text or send an email back, just acknowledging them and letting them know that I would be calling around, 2:00 the next day because I'm in session. So at least there's some acknowledgement. But yeah, so no communication or 24, 48 hours. It just, you're going to lose potential clients for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And so I am a very data-driven lady. Like, if you don't have the numbers, don't tell me what's happening in your practice, because you don't really know. So I think the first most important thing that we have to train clinicians on is getting data for their calls, because they don't have it. Or they'll say, I have this spreadsheet. And I'm like, well, what are your percentages? What are your conversion rates? Where are people calling you from? And people have no idea. And so you're kind of wasting your money and time, if you're not really tracking that, because you're not going to be able to improve your ratios without that data.
I love that you're bringing data into this conversation. And I kind of feel like some people are cringing. And I remember when I started bringing data in, and even with Kate and I in the private practice startup, we have a dashboard that tracks everything. And I remember the days of this would be our conversation before data. Well, I feel, and then you look at the data, and sometimes the data would blow your mind about, like, it's the opposite of what you thought. And I love that you say, Whitney, is because data is so important, because it tells you where to put your money and your time. Other than that, like you said, you are wasting both of them.
Definitely. Yes, I'll give a quick example of that. So in our calls, the very first thing we do is ask for their name and phone number. In case we get disconnected, we can follow up with them, because sometimes you get through that call and they don't want to go back and tell you any information. So get that at the beginning. And the next most important question is, how did you hear about us?
Absolutely.
Because yes, we are spending so much money on marketing. And so I'm amazed how therapists will be like, oh, I did this really cool ad in a magazine, or I got on the radio, or I did these things. And yeah, that might look cool on social media, but if no one calls and you don't get any clients from it, it really wasn't effective. And then they're not tracking that. And so instead of putting our time and money into new ways to get business, like find the ways that are working and keep putting your time and money into those, because that's only going to make your calls go up.
And it's cool that you mentioned that as well. And as you become a business owner with systems, is you can make little small tweaks. I very much remember like early on, and they're less costly, less time, they're easier. And I remember early on, Kate and I actually went to Russell Brunson. If you know him, he's Funnel Hacker. And I remember reading his book, and there's this like 2 pages in the book where he hires a coach. And the coach says to him, you know, you funnel hackers are so brilliant, but so dumb at the same time, is that you will create, you know, a project or a product and you'll sell it to your audience. And then you're like, well, great. Now I have to create something else. And it's exhausting, right? So what you're mentioning, Whitney, it's like, well, if you think the radio thing is working, but you're not sure, then you're trying something else, and then you're trying something else. And that in fact is, you know, very exhausting and tiring. But when you can look at your data and be like, oh, well, this source seems to be working, we can, you know, put more ad spend to it, or, you know, it's working, but it's not working as well. What if we changed how we ask the question? Or for this month, we're going to put this question first and this one second. And then you begin to track that and see what happens. So I love that you're bringing data in this conversation. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what we need to do. Like the numbers are going to tell us where the problems are, right? So like every week I go in, I track a lot of different things in my practice, but calls is what I definitely track. And how many calls did we get the past week? What percentages of those calls converted into clients? And then I specifically like to look at what percentages of the calls are actually insurance-based people who didn't schedule because of insurance, because I want that number to stay around the same every single month. And then looking at those conversions, how many of those actually converted into clients is really important as well. And so if something is off, then I know, like for Google, we get most of our traction through Google. I would say 50 to 60% of all of our clients that call are coming through Google. And so I want to, first of all, keep putting my time and money into Google because it's working. But if I see that, oh, this 1 month only 30% or this 1 week only 30%, then I'm like, ooh, what just happened to our analytics? And I can go in and I can check those things as opposed to just burying my head in the sand and moving on.
Yeah, I remember that too. For some reason, you know, my ad was getting triggered for free, like free counseling, right? And so those are important things. But like you said, the data will tell you the story and then tell you where to go look.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Love it. Let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor. As a private practice owner, there are dozens of things to worry about. If you decide to accept insurance billing does not have to be a worry. Practice Solutions is a remote billing company who connects providers with billers in the U.S. who specialize in mental health billing. Their expertise has helped clinicians increase and maintain steady revenue by submitting and following up on claims regularly, resolving old aging claims, and performing eligibility and benefit checks. With Practice Solutions, you're assigned a billing expert who learns the ins and outs of your practice, functioning as an extension of your own team. So you can focus on what matters most, your clients and growing your practice. One of Practice Solutions' current clients says, Practice Solutions has been amazing for my practice, its growth, and my peace of mind when it comes to billing. Practice Solutions works with clients ranging from solo practitioners just starting out, as well as to larger group practices with multiple clinicians. Practice Solutions offers a free billing consultation to determine if their services are a good fit for you and your practice. Visit practicesoul.com/startupnation and schedule an appointment. Again, that's a free consultation at practicesoul.com/startupnation. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribing incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. Look, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR available today with 4.9 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot and Google. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS as in private practice startup and receive a special 2-month trial, absolutely free. And hey, if you're coming from another EHR, no worries. Therapy Notes will import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost to you so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time. Go to therapynotes.com and enter code PPS for your 2-month free trial. So Whitney, what's next?
Yeah. And so another thing that you want to look at as far as your data, and especially for, I guess it's really for all practices, I was thinking private pay, is looking at why people aren't scheduling, right? So you want to make sure that you're tracking those services, because you might see, okay, well, they're not scheduling because they want eating disorder treatment or they want marriage counseling, and maybe your marriage therapist is full. And so that data is going to show you what you need to add to your practice, what services, what new clinicians. So it's not just about tracking who did schedule. It's about also tracking who didn't schedule and why they didn't schedule. It might be they need more evening appointments. Well, then you need to hire a therapist that can work evenings.
Got it. Love it.
Yeah. Well, we could talk a little bit past data to some of the other fun things about the importance of building that relationship with the person on the phone, because it's through that relationship that you're able to sustain therapy, you're able to explain things, you're able to show empathy, compassion, and that's what's going to make them want to schedule with you. Because a lot of times, I mean, I know that when I call a place about my kids, especially because I'm making appointments, oh, I cringe when the person on the other end says, okay, what's your insurance? I'm like, you didn't even ask about my child and why I need to come in for whatever therapy I'm coming in for, or whatever treatment. And it makes me just feel like a number or like money, when really it's about caring for somebody.
That's a really good point, especially on like kind of the opposite end, right? Even if you have insurance and are tending to use it, I kind of hate the barrage of getting all the details and demographics first. And then it's like, you just want to share why you're calling.
Yeah. Yeah. So after we ask that, we go through the name, the contact phone number to get back in touch with them. And then we ask them how they heard about us. And then the next thing is what's bringing you in for therapy, so that we can listen and provide those empathetic responses. And then after that, we really try to take a specific therapist that can meet the need of that specific concern, and really trying to tell them the evidence-based therapy that we can provide. So it might be, well, Katie would be a great, and I just happen to use the name Katie, but actually I have a therapist named Katie. And she would be a great fit for your cognitive behavioral therapy because she's trained in this evidence-based treatment and it helps with depression. And she has the availability, and she's been working for the practice this many years and sharing a little bit about her. So when they hear there's an actual person that actually understands their need, that actually has a treatment that helps with that need, you're selling something, which feels kind of bad, but you're actually selling something that's going to help them. So you can feel really good about that.
Nice. Yeah, I know. And I know that word, even outside the therapy world, always doesn't feel great. Right. And I think we've kind of reframed it as you're just building relationship. Right. And by sharing about this person, Katie, you're building relationship of this might be the right fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I didn't say this other data at the very beginning, but it kind of fits in here. It's so important that you're tracking the conversion rates with each type of inquiry. Okay. So like at our practice, we have people email asking about therapy. We might have someone fill out a contact form through the website. You might have someone book online for online booking appointments, or they're calling. And so all these different, and occasionally through social media, which is never really a good situation. But through all these, tracking, how's my conversion rate with each one? So when we have calls, our conversion rate is way higher than when someone emails or when someone fills out a contact form. Those are harder for us to convert. Now, I'm always shocked when other practices tell me they convert well that way. I'm like, what? Like, we got to get people on the phone. So no matter what we do, everything on the website points to phone call, right? And you want to make sure that your website is pointing them to the way they're going to convert best. Because if you're saying to them, hey, book online, well, why would I be telling them to do that? Because most of our online booking, doesn't really go as well as they do when they call. And so you want to make sure you're tracking that and that you're directing people in the right way.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really important too. I know that, there's been kind of arguments about that, about like booking online, but they don't even know what they're booking for yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the arguments I hear about that, a lot of it is, well, they're not the right fit for me, and then I'm spending this time and they're spending their money. And I'm like, well, does the doctor, like, they could read your website, like a doctor might see you and they might not specialize in what you're looking for, but they're going to give you a referral, but you still have to pay for that time with the doctor. And you're still getting an assessment completed. And it's better that at least they came in the door and had an appointment than not having an appointment, right? Because we need to be getting people in for treatment and having a positive experience. So even if you're not the best fit for them, at least you did an evaluation with someone and you pointed them in the best direction. So sometimes those online bookings aren't the best fit, but if they want to be assessed for best fit, they will pick up the phone and call. That's an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Then what else?
Yeah, well, kind of going with that is this idea that people offer these free consults, right? And so a lot of therapists will say, okay, well, I convert best through a free consult. And if I do the free consult, 100% of them end up coming. And I'm thinking, well, that's because they already would have scheduled with you, and I feel like when you're offering that free consult, you're really bringing your services down. It's like doctors don't offer free 15-minute evaluations with us, but as therapists, we feel like we have this need to offer these free assessments. Now, we offer them. Somebody calls, they want a free assessment, and they ask for it, and they just want to talk to the therapist for 5 or 10 minutes, totally. But if you're offering it on your website on a consistent basis and pushing people to do a free assessment, for 15 minutes, then you're really wasting a lot of your time and energy as a therapist that you should be getting paid for that.
Whitney, share with the audience about how you're distinguishing between like that call versus a consult. What would you say are the differences?
Yeah, well, so when people call, they're talking to my admin and she's evaluating. And so it's her time and energy as opposed to the therapists that are seeing clients. But if somebody wants to talk to the therapist, which is pretty rare and they have to ask for it, but if they ask for it, we do offer that 10-minute quick phone call. And usually the therapist is more explaining their therapeutic orientation, types of clients they've worked with before. And they're not necessarily saying to the client, tell me more about your issue, because we were talking about this on the previous podcast. Those questions will go on for a really long time and you need to limit it to that 10 minutes.
Right. So I think consult here is you're talking about like monopolizing the therapist's time. But again, if you're a solopreneur, you're probably the one answering the phone and you're kind of going through some of these things that we had talked about, right? Not getting into a session or things like that. Gotcha.
Definitely. Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Because I know that, people, and like Kate said on our previous podcast, on Whitney's podcast, is we've all been guilty of that, getting caught up in really having a session when we don't know how to navigate the call, but then also the feel bads, right? Because we're therapists. Like, how do we get someone off the call after you're looking at your watch and it's 25 minutes and you're like, what am I doing? Like, I got to go pick up my kids or something like that. It's really learning how to get the information, selling the right therapist, selling yourself, and getting them in for an appointment and not getting involved in really a whole discussion about what's wrong and how can you help them.
100%. Yeah. And so going back to some of that data, looking back on those conversion rates, people ask me a lot, well, what conversion rate should I be shooting for? So I'd love to share with you what I've seen. And then from y'all, I'd love to hear from y'all what you think the conversion rate should be. But conversion rates that I've heard for insurance-based practices are around 70 to 80%. So 70 to 80% of the people that are reaching out should be scheduling. And then for private pay practices, it is 30 to 50% of them should be scheduling. So if your conversion rates are lower than that, you should be looking at what the problem is. And so going back and looking at what's my call script? How are we answering the phone in real time? Because you've lost a lot if you're not answering the phone in real time. And if your numbers are better than that, then awesome. Then you should be coming on a podcast and talking about how to convert clients.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's, Kate, will you track a lot of data in your group practice? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say anything under 50% is concerning. For conversion. And then you need to do a deep dive and figure out what is it that's not working and what is it that is working for things that are on the higher end.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've heard about the same ratios too, Whitney. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then how do you, so say you do have, someone who is kind of needy or wants to monopolize your time, like how do you have your admin or you as a therapist, if you're taking the call, kind of close that and move them forward?
Yeah, I love what my admin says a lot. She'll say, that's beyond my pay grade.
Mine says the same thing. That's so funny.
Okay. Yeah. And it brings a little humor to the table, also calms them down. Sometimes the admin will say, well, I have a therapist that'd be great to work with you. And it's best to tell them what you're going through so you don't have to repeat yourself again. I'm really just here to get you scheduled and to take care of you. So let me redirect you back to let's get you scheduled, because that's what's going to actually help you the most, more than me talking with you on the phone.
Nice. I love those objection handlers. Very good. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And another problem we run into is just that conversation about insurance. So how do we talk to people about insurance? And it's such an educational piece that a lot of people don't understand how it works. They think it's going to be the same as going to their doctor or to another appointment. And mental health is just not the same. In fact, I was just at the Licensed Professional Counselors Association for Georgia a few weeks ago, and this was a big topic. Even the idea of diagnosing, that therapists kind of feel this pressure of diagnosing based on insurance. And clients don't understand that. They don't understand, well, you have to have a severe enough diagnosis for your treatment to be covered by your insurance. They're not going to cover V codes or marriage counseling or all those things. And so we have to really talk to clients about that. And we start that conversation on the intake call. And we're talking to them about that while they're in treatment, because they sometimes are going back to this conversation about insurance or conversation about diagnosing. And so letting them know how all that works and how insurance works is really important. And I have found a lot of times when I educate them on that, they're like, oh, I didn't know that's how it worked. And I even, have sent my family members to therapy, and we have insurance, but I don't use it. I don't want to use it. Like, I don't want all that tracked. I want to be able to do the type of treatment that is best for my family, and so I let people know that.
And I think that's really important. I did some research. One of my brothers was going through a huge issue several years ago, and he lives in Connecticut. I'm in Florida, and it was really about finding the right therapist. You know what I mean? And that's just so important. And what I've found is there's some therapists who have built great insurance-based practices, but I've also found that usually those therapists don't work on the business side of the business, right? And you don't see as much information online or directory, so it's hard to see if they're the right therapist. But when you do have someone who doesn't usually take insurance, and they're doing the marketing and working on their business, is you can find, if they really specialize. And, when we're going to therapy, we want a specialist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So how does your admin answer that question of, do you take insurance, if they're calling right off the bat?
Yeah. So she says, before we talk about that, I would love to get to know you and what's going on for you or your loved one, so we can get you to the best fit therapist, regardless of pay, because we want you to get the best treatment, and it might not be with somebody that takes your insurance. So that's kind of how we handle that question.
Nice. Good. Kind of similar in a way.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I think the only other thing that I think is really important to mention is answering the phone. And just a quick going back to numbers idea here, and this is a really simplified example. So let's say a practice is at a 50% conversion rate. So 50% of the people that call are scheduling. If you get 4 phone calls in a day, we can assume that if you answer every single one of them, you're going to convert 2 out of 4 people. Client is a lot of money, by the way. I mean, they could come in for a year. Who knows? Let's say you only answer 2 of the 4 calls. Well, then you're only scheduling 1 of the 4 people, because by the time you call those other 2 back, they've already gone down their Psychology Today or whatever list. And so you've lost 1 client because you didn't have someone answering the phone. Mm-hmm. And even for me, when I have a list of providers I've been given for my kids or for myself, I go down that list, and whoever can get me in first and answers the phone and is nice, I schedule. And I think other people are doing the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Good point. But I love that you bring really the operations side to this, as well as numbers and data, to really understand what's working and not working and where to spend your time. But also offering, us in Startup Nation, some of the things that you talk about and say, and how you move the conversation along. Anything that we've missed that you want to make sure we add in?
I don't think so. I think I kind of went through most of it.
Good. And what do you want our audience to most take away from your message today?
I think the most important thing is answering the phone. Mm-hmm. And I see practices over and over. They're spending all this money on SEO or all these other things, but then they don't answer the calls live. And so they've really lost everything they've put out there because they're not converting them.
Gotcha. And so for folks who are in the solopreneur place, do you have any resources or recommendations on either how to find someone to answer the phone or any referral sources or resources that you would recommend?
Yeah. So there definitely are virtual assistant companies out there. And people enjoy those. I mean, virtual assistant companies work in such a way that one person can work for multiple practices and then you're not hiring someone full time. I have found that I enjoy hiring someone local. I love having someone face to face. And so I always, from the very beginning, really have had that. My first person was a mom. She had 4 kids. She was fabulous. She worked with me for about 2 years and took calls. When we started, I was like, you'll probably get like maybe a call a day, and then it got to the point she was getting like 3 to 5 calls a day. She was like, I can't do this anymore. But that ended up working out really well for me. And that way it's a little bit more cost effective because some of the virtual assistant companies you have to pay more per hour, even though they're pre-trained. So it's just kind of figuring out what works for you. But I would say put out a job, see who responds, try to hire somebody local and see if that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I know that you have something for our audience. What is that?
Yes, I have a PDF on how to convert calls to clients. So it's just like a quick cheat sheet for the audience to be able to use. And then I also have 4 tips to networking and marketing with churches because I do faith-based specific. And honestly, even if you're not a faith-based practice, this PDF is going to help you because therapists can really gain a lot of referrals from churches and people are going to their pastor all the time with their problems. Pastors can't handle it. They're overwhelmed. But talking to a church is like again, it's a science because the way they might be thinking about counseling or how do you make that relationship and show them the importance of like, you're the pastor, you really can't answer all their problems. You really need to be referring them out. And so that PDF kind of walks you through that process.
Awesome. Good stuff. So we'll add that to our show notes page too. So you don't have to look for it. But if you were just listening to this on your favorite place to listen to podcasts, you can always head over to privatepracticestartup.com and you'll see the podcast tab right there. So you can click on that and find Whitney's podcast. We'll also put our call script and you can use the code MORECLIENTS to get a hefty discount. I recommend grabbing them both. Ours also comes with a course. As well as a video walkthrough through the script, and then take what Whitney has, take what we have, and combine them together to, really look at what works for you. I know that sometimes someone will say something in a different way that just feels better, and that's really helpful. So you have great resources there. And Whitney, thank you so much for being a second-time guest on our podcast. Like I said, we'll go ahead and put the show notes for your previous podcast as well. Kate?
Yeah, Whitney, thank you so much for being here. It was great to hear your perspective. As Katie said earlier, it was focused a lot on more of like the operational and data and like the important aspect of answering the calls and really capturing those in the moment when people are calling live. And I'd love to hear your perspective on it as well. So thank you for being here, Startup Nation. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. And as always, we want to encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review our show. Share with your friends and fellow colleagues, anyone who could benefit from this message. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. In the meantime, stay inspired.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.